Welcome, everybody, to the Future Belongs to Creators podcast. I don't know why that was so upbeat. I guess I'm feeling in a happy mood today. I'm joined by my beautiful, wonderful co-hosts, Haley and Miguel.
Hey.
And this
Hey,
is a show about the
hey.
creator economy. Last week, we talked about influencers versus creators. And we got into some real great discussions about what it meant to be a creator and how much influence you had, and sort of led to us feeling like we should do a whole episode about the responsibility that a creator has to their audience, to do right by them. Is that a thing creators feel? I don't know. We're going to discuss it today, and we've got a bunch of people here in the chat, and I hope that you all will share your own thoughts as we get into this. How are you both doing today? We had Miguel join this call. He had some internet issues, and he joined right before I hit that go live button. We didn't tell you, Miguel, but Haley and I decided we were going to go live without you if you hadn't joined right then.
No, just go on without me. It's fine. No, I
thought it would make for a wonderful
entrance.
entrance.
Yeah, like you could have just shown up being like, oh, I did it. Reset the internet.
Well, yeah, I mean, what's great about this is like now I feel really good about being here because I had that momentary dread just before we went live, and then it all worked 20 seconds before we went live. So I'm feeling good. Like this is intoxicating.
Yeah. It's a great feeling.
I know. I also feel great. I feel like last week, Charlie got off, once we got off the podcast, Charlie was, if I'm remembering this correctly, it was a dreary Wednesday, and Charlie got off the podcast and she was like, damn, I feel good now. And knowing, just spending time as remote workers, spending time with two of my coworkers, talking about stuff I enjoy, is just fun. So yeah. I'm feeling great.
Super fun. And all you people as well in the chat, you're a part of that. So thanks for being here. Thanks for watching. And like I said, as we talk about this topic, please share your own thoughts. Answer the questions that we ask each other yourself in the chat. Let's keep this conversation going. I want to start. You got something before we start?
I'm jumping in. Before we get started, though, I do feel like Teddy's YouTube video deserves a call out.
Good point. Yeah.
Not because of the content, because the content, I mean, come on, that was like, everyone's making fun of me over here, which is fine, No, I rather enjoyed it. But
we need to give some backstory. Haley made a comment about British subjects in the last episode, and Teddy made a hilarious comment in the chat about that. And then he made a YouTube video about that whole situation and about how the chat can impact the live podcast. It was
yes. But this is more at ConvertKit. We do this thing. We do like celebrations, public celebrations. So every team meeting we do these public celebrations, which is really fun, gives people life, and it gives you an opportunity to call out people that have done good work. This is more of just like a celebration for the fact that it was Teddy's first YouTube video. Like, we have talked like that first step is like the worst or the hardest step, and he took it at my expense, but he still took it, So
I think Teddy was celebrating you with that video. So it wasn't at your expense.
I don't know. I'm just teasing.
Okay, may I ask you a question about responsibility to the audience now?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, thank you. Let's start with what responsibility you feel to your audience. Because we all have audiences. I know, Miguel, you're not on social media and things a lot personally, but like we have an audience with this show. I'm keen to hear what responsibility you feel to all the people listening right now, and Haley, for you as well, and with Happy Houseplant, with creator sessions. Yeah, do you feel a responsibility to your audience?
Yeah. I mean, so on the most basic level, I feel responsibility to provide value. To me, I see it as a contract. So if I get your attention in return, I want to give you value for that time that you're spending on me, and hopefully make you feel like you find value and you'll come back next time. So I can't imagine how I could show up to something and just not be prepared and if you're going to show up and I'm just going to sit here and not have given this a second thought and just sort of wing it and not do my fair share of preparation, then I feel like it's not. I'm invalidating our contract because you showed up and I didn't. So that's kind of how I see it. What do you think, Haley?
Yeah, I agree. I think one of the things that Miguel actually brought up right before this call was like the responsibility of spreading information, like share the information that you share. And I think 2020, gosh, 2020, man, right? But there are so many things that people were talking about online. And there were so many dangerous things that people were talking about online, right? And my audience on, let's say Instagram, for example, it might not be huge, but I do know that if I was like, I really felt over the course of 2020, a really big responsibility to learn myself before I shared any information or I shared my opinion on thoughts, because I feel like a lot of people take to heart we'll call them like their inner circle, their very close friends, right? And that's most of like my social following, let's say on Instagram, like they really take to heart your peers and your good group of friends, like their opinions. So I didn't want to share any information because I know that my opinion to my following was going to be weighted, because my following is a lot of people that I actually know, right? But I didn't post very much of anything this year as it related to like heavy topics, because I didn't feel knowledgeable enough to be talking about a lot of things.
Okay, yeah. But what about the responsibility to your audience in creator sessions, for example? Is the responsibility you feel to them, does it extend past the information that you give to them? I don't know. Is there anything else that comes into it for you?
Oof, creator sessions.
And maybe not. That's fine too. Like anything is a valid answer here. I'm just
No. I mean, the context of the show for creator sessions, right, is giving other creators a platform, right? So like, I feel like it's my responsibility to book artists and to book the right people that are sharing the right message. I was really intentional about booking a diverse group of artists. But then one of the things that in our conversation that we have before recording happens is that this is your time to share your story about your work. And some of that work and some of that art might be hard things to talk about, right? Race being one of them. Or, there was a lot of things that were happening or that were sources of inspiration for the creators that were on creator sessions, where their art was driven by things that have happened in culture that don't shed a positive light on humanity. And it was really important for me to give them a platform to tell that story, even though it was hard. A really good example of that, this episode hasn't had that many views. There's whatever backstory to that, but is Pat Cosso's episode. He's a performance painter, and he painted alongside Common Song, Letter to the Freedom. Whatever. I'm having a mom or blank, whatever. Anyways, but that was a challenging, like he painted a noose, right? And he's painting this performance piece, and it was a really strong stance and a really strong, like it was a really strong message that he was saying. And I wanted to give him the platform to say it.
That's a really interesting point, Miguel. Maybe you want to go into this now, but we were talking sort of briefly before the show about this idea of giving a platform, right? Because I think that as a creator, you can have the responsibility to give platform to other people. And that comes with its own set of like, when you give someone a platform, you're telling your audience inadvertently that you are happy to share this message, I guess, is one way that you could say it, that you are wanting to put this out there and that you are wanting them to see it. Yeah. Miguel, did you want to share
Yeah, it's kind of exactly how you framed it. I feel like you giving your platform to somebody is kind of a way of endorsing them. So it's a big responsibility, because in a way you're kind of co-signing whatever it is that this person's about to do or say. And sure, it also depends on the context of what you're doing. So if it's sort of an interview show, the interviewer and the interviewee don't necessarily have to see eye to eye. And maybe it's your responsibility to your audience to have that contrarian opinion while they're there and kind of be the advocate for the other side of the conversation, as opposed to just sitting there and just nodding and say, or just asking questions and just letting them say whatever they want and then moving on to the next question without addressing something, especially if something they say might come across as, controversial, or maybe it's not described well enough for your audience. So you step in for them and say, can you go on a little bit more about what you mean by X or Y or Z? So part of that comes with your own ability to be a good interviewer and like your own skill set, and just what you want your podcast to be. And so I feel like there is a set of responsibility there for you to advocate for your audience, because I mean, sure, here we have a little bit of a chat and we have conversations going on the side. And sometimes we highlight those things and bring them into the conversation. But that's not necessarily always the case. Or in the case of our podcast listeners, they're not participating. Or if you're not here live, you're not participating. You're just listening to it after the fact. So being able to call things out in the moment for maybe later listenership is also important too, because once it's done, it's done. And then you're sort of backpedaling at that point if something wasn't done properly, or if somebody went on your show and misrepresented something that you implicitly gave your +1 to because you never addressed it. You just let them say it and moved on. So that to me is scary. So that's why I had Ben on, because Ben's my good friend and he would never do that.
You could trust him.
So,
Yeah,
exactly.
I think that's a good way of putting it though, Miguel, that it's by having someone on to your platform and putting them in front of the audience you've built, you are implicitly giving a +1 to the things they're saying, unless you call it out and it's a debate and a discussion and things like that. But I think you still have to own the responsibility that you put that message in front of those people now, right? Like for the ideas that were expressed, no matter how far out or like contrarian they are to yours, you gave space for them to be in front of your audience. And in some cases, that's you actually serving your audience by putting those views in front of them. Giving them alternate ways to approach a problem, things like that. But it has its positives and negatives. What about we've got the really good response in the chat. As you were saying that as well, Miguel, I was thinking like yes, people can chat and we have a responsibility to only pick the right things to showcase, in this. Not that I've never seen a message in the chat, that I probably wouldn't showcase. People are great, sharing lots of value in here. But I want to bring up this one from Ben, because I like that he says that the responsibility he has to his audience is to do no harm. That for the most part, he's creating for himself. He's creating the content he wants to create, as long as he's doing no harm. And I think that's a really good way of putting it. And it kind of is, it brings me into another topic I want to talk about, which is like, where does the line end of this responsibility? Because Miguel, like you talking about the value that, the responsibility you feel to bring that to our audience here on this show, that could get weighty. That could get heavy over time, like always putting pressure on yourself every moment to be delivering that value. I know that's definitely a pressure that I've felt on my YouTube channel. The bigger my audience has gotten, the more that sort of like weighed on me. I don't know. Yeah. Any thoughts on that? Where does the responsibility end in this discussion?
I don't know, but I do sometimes wish that we could just I know how we could pop up their chats. Sometimes I wish we could just zoom them into the conversation.
Right.
Join. Where does the responsibility end? I don't know. I think I definitely agree with Ben's thought on that is that being a creator can be a lonely world. And if you are so focused on creating for someone else other than yourself, then you could end up going down a scary, dangerous path in that way. And something that's ultimately not very fulfilling, right? If you're creating for other people and not creating for yourselves. And this goes back to the episode that we had, which was creating for what others want versus what you want.
Yep.
As far as where the responsibility ends, honestly, I think the way that Ben described it was great, right? Is that you're ultimately, you're doing no harm, right? Because you can toe that. I don't even know if yes, I think that's a good measurement, right? Because there's on this scale or spectrum of content, right? Like, let's look at Happy Houseplant. Like, I have really fluffy content, like my content for the most part on Happy Houseplant, along with my partner, Mandy, is mostly about taking care of houseplants, right? So the most harm that we're going to do is we're going to help you kill your plant. We give you misinformation and you're going to kill your plant. That's unfortunate, but sometimes those things are like, out of our control. And obviously we don't want to do that because our goal is to help people that have black thumbs, turn them into green thumbs. Right. But it's on the other spectrum, right? There's content out there that is, there's this great Instagrammer. Her account has blown up. Sharon Says So. She was a high school economics teacher. She did debate and all this stuff. And she's grown massively over the course of the last, I'd say 6 to 8 months. And she's covered everything from the presidential election. And she covers government for adults. So she basically is reteaching the government and a lot of things that I have forgotten since, we'll say, high school, things that I learned that Miguel probably knows because he was a high school teacher, but reteaching these things about our democracy to adults that have forgotten this information. And her content, it's really important that she doesn't provide any sort of misinformation, right? That actually changes people's decisions on, let's say, for example, who they're voting for, or what their stance is on, what their stance is on conspiracy theories like QAnon. Do they believe it? Do they not believe it? Right? Are they spreading misinformation? So her content is so important because she's trying to stop disinformation. And so, I feel like for sure, it's a scale of type of, my disinformation might kill a $5 plant from Walgreens. Her disinformation is going to change the way that somebody votes, or more continuing to spread further disinformation, which is a lot heavier.
I think if I spread misinformation to my audience, it could negatively impact their careers. I guess that's the harm that I could potentially do if I gave someone poor advice when they asked, how do I handle this promotion discussion? If I gave them something that's going to cause them to say something they absolutely shouldn't to their manager or something like that, they're not going to think very fondly of me that they followed my advice and then lost their job or something like that.
Hence the world of disclaimers, though, right? This is the world of the internet. You're do not take this information as medical advice, right? Every health and wellness podcast that you've ever seen says, go to your doctor if you're feeling sick. Don't, take apple cider vinegar for everything,
Yeah.
But yeah.
Well, that's where I think this line ends, is that we have a responsibility, I believe, as creators, to do no harm, like Ben said, to communicate information that we believe to be correct, either from our experiences or our research or whatever. If it's our opinion, clearly state this is our opinion. But also, the audience has a responsibility to be grown-ass people as well. And,
yes.
That's exactly that was going to be my
Miguel.
point.
He wagged his finger at me.
Yeah. No, I was like, yes, that's exactly what was going to be my thing. Is at the end of the day, it's advice, right? It's not a command. So I'm saying, if I were you, based on what you've described to me, this is what I would do. I'm not saying go do this. Has my stamp of approval. It's a guarantee.
It's the only way it should be.
And if you do this, you have guaranteed success. And if you don't, then you can come chase me with a pitchfork. That's not how this works. So, I mean, just you have to be mentally prepared. To me, as a consumer of content, and also as a creator, you have to be mentally prepared for how not just what you're receiving, but how your work is received. You need to iterate on that, learn from it when possible, and then use that to get better at what you do. You're not always going to do the perfect thing. You might sometimes misspeak. If a newspaper prints something that's wrong, it will correct that. And with editorial, I forget what it's called, right? But if something is misprinted. A retraction, that's the word. Yeah, they fix it because they realize that they have a lot of responsibility to get it right, and we're human. We make mistakes, and sometimes we don't get it right. So even if you don't want, even if you want to create purely for creation, if you want to think, okay, I don't want to have my audience in mind when I'm creating something. I just want to have the perspective of I'm just going to put out whatever I want, and if people like it, great, and if not, great. And the effect of that is, well, it's your responsibility to some degree. Like, you can, if you don't want it to affect your work, that's fine. But at the end of the day, you have responsibility for the work that you put out. But the people who are listening or reading or looking at what you're doing also have a responsibility to understand that this is one person's point of view. It's, it's not, the internet doesn't wash our hands of our actions. And I feel like sometimes where like the internet has this like buffer zone where, like, if I'm not right in front of somebody, I feel a lot more emboldened in what I say and what I do, because like that person's not going to punch me. He can't punch me through my computer. I can say whatever I want and be a total jerk, right? Or do something that's crazy because I have this like distance from the consequences. But as a creator, your consequence can be that your audience, leaves you, or
Yeah,
or
I guess
you
for
get the
people,
audience you don't want, which is scary.
yes, that too. I think that maybe not everyone is as motivated by us by the like doing right by people side of things. Like, we just have to accept that that's a fact. Some people aren't motivated by that, but maybe a way to flip it is that it's your reputation on the line here, not just your responsibility to do right by an audience, but it's also if you do things that are doing wrong by your audience, is that a way to phrase that? It could be harming your reputation. And like, surely that's something that we all care about, is the presence we have in the world, and, for better or worse, what people think of us, and what value we're bringing. And I don't know, maybe people who aren't so driven by the audience responsibility thing might be more driven by that part. I want to bring in this comment here from Design Extreme. As a creator, is it okay to share knowledge even though I'm not perfect on that topic? I think this is a good point, because we're just talking about misinformation, right? And we can only share what we know. And I would say that that's where it ends. Like, it's your responsibility to share what you know, not to share things that you don't know. So if there's parts of a topic that you're not an expert in, maybe just don't share those parts. I don't know. What do you both think?
Gosh, I feel like you can go, like on the weightedness, right, of the topic. Like, this question is obviously, I can answer this very differently. So we saw a lot of this coming from like, Black creators during like the heat of 2021, where one of the things that was important, I think, to the Black community, at least what I heard from Black creators, was that people acknowledging that they don't know, but sharing what they do know, right?
Yes.
And recognizing that I don't know everything, but I do know that this is an important topic, or this is something that is important to share. And that by silence, in some cases, was louder than silence was louder than sharing, like, than not saying anything. No, that was right. That's the same thing. Whatever. You get what I'm saying. So, man, I don't know.
That's your answer. I don't know.
That's my answer. I don't know.
What do you think, Miguel?
Yeah.
Because I think this is coming probably from a more teaching perspective side of things. Like, if you're sharing information on a topic, and you're not perfect at it yourself, you definitely don't have to be perfect at anything to teach it, but you can only teach what you know. What do you think, Miguel?
I think Haley nailed it by saying, I don't know. I think that's exactly the point. I think it's important to highlight what you don't know. I think like, if somebody asked me a question when I was a teacher, you have to resist the urge to feel like you're like this all-knowing sage, and just be okay with highlighting what you don't know, and say, I don't know the answer to that, but I will find out and get back to you. That's the best way to handle that sort of situation. And research actually shows that if you are somebody who is willing to not just say, I know the answer, but is willing to point out, actually, I don't know the answer, not only does it create more trust between you and your audience, but it also makes people listen to you more, because it kind of breaks up the dynamic of, I'm going to ask a question and you are going to vomit knowledge. Like, if I come out of nowhere and just say, you know what, I know I'm an expert on this, or I know you came here because you think of me as someone with answers, but I don't have the answer.
Yeah.
And that's a big part.
Yeah, that's a huge sign of respect. I used to talk about that a lot actually in coaching, is that like building relationships with my players when I coached volleyball, is that saying that you didn't know was a sign, like was something that ultimately led to greater respect for me as a coach. But was listening to, for those of you guys who don't know, Adam Grant. He's phenomenal. He's amazing. But I was listening to a podcast actually
He's
with him
great.
and Gwyneth Paltrow on the Goop podcast, and he was talking about this exact thing. I think he called himself like an information, was it like a logic bully? You know,
Yep.
but he was talking about this idea that by saying that you don't know the answer, that you end up building better relationships with people, and also that people that are in a leadership position who can say criticism out loud about themselves also end up having, like their peers and their followers, fans, audience, whatever, end up having a much greater level of respect for them. And I think back to that on the creator side or on the ConvertKit side of things. And there have certainly been mistakes that our leadership team, like, we have a young leadership team, and there's certainly been moments where they've recognized mistakes that they've made, and it has ultimately made us want and to desire to follow them. Right. And so I think that as we're kind of leading into that conversation, I think that's a huge part of being a responsibility as a creator, is that when or if you do share misinformation, or you do say something or share something with your audience, that you come in and you say, to your point, Miguel, hey, I was wrong. This is a retraction. And that could be something on as simple as, hey, so I told you to put vinegar in your houseplant soil and that killed your plant. I'm sorry. Or it could be, hey, I talked about this thing that was really important to our culture and to humanity, and it turns out that I was wrong and I shared some misinformation, and I'm sorry. Right. And I think that's a really important thing to be able to do in a position of leadership, in a position of authority, in a position of influence, which is what we had talked about last week. Is, not all creators all creators have influence. And I think that that's really important, a really important skill to have.
Agreed. I just want to highlight this comment from Teddy while we're still sort of on the topic of the teaching. If you're not a guru, you can be a guide. So, right, you don't have to know everything about a topic to share about it. You can guide people to the correct information elsewhere. It doesn't have to come from your brain. I like that, Teddy. Thanks for sharing.
And something that you made me think about, Haley, is there's this guy I love, and his name is I want to say it's Steve Ramsey. It's definitely Ramsey. I don't know if he's Steve or Dave. It's something like that. But
one of the Ramseys.
He has one of the Ramseys.
Dave Ramsey, the financial guru.
Nope, not Dave Ramsey. Then it's Steve Ramsey. That's why I always think Steve. But before we go down the Ramsey sidebar here, I just want to say he did this great video where he was like, he's a woodworking guy. So he's like, hey, I think that I'm not going to get too far into the weeds here, but he said, I think that this type of way that you join wood doesn't work. It's a waste of money. If you buy this tool, it's like $200 and it doesn't really add any value, and you're wasting your time and your money. And then, of course, there were people out there who swore by it. And so people went all up in arms and said, actually, I use this all the time and I love it and it's great. And it makes everything that I make so much sturdier and better and whatever. So rather than digging his heels in, he was like, you know what? The last time I actually tried doing this was a long time ago. And I decided then that this sucks. So I'm actually going to buy one of these things and I'm going to try it again. And I'm going to do a few tests to like basically figure out if it actually does make things stronger or better or whatever, if there's some value to it. And he did it. And he's like, okay, so you know what? Turns out I made up my mind about something and then just like stood on that soapbox forever, because I feel like I checked that box off and was like, I have decided that this is terrible and it is just terrible forever. And he actually revisited it because of his audience. And he made a great video about how he went back. So it actually ended up generating some really cool content because he was willing to realize that he kind of dug his heels in about something that turns out that he was wrong about, or at least at the very least, it's subjective and there's no right or wrong. It's good for you, but I have other methods that are just as good or work better for me or whatever. So just being able to pivot like that is really cool. And just using everything as a way to engage your audience, as opposed to like, let's create sides and just yell at each other about what our different perspectives are, So
I love that example. That's a really good example. I feel like I want to share an example of where I saw a creator recently not quite realize the responsibility they had to their audience, and it went a little bit wrong. And I'm not going to name names, but anyone in the design industry will know what I'm talking about. So recently, this design leader who's like very well respected in the design space, like has a large following on Twitter especially, tweeted something about design portfolios, saying that if you have design or creative in your portfolio URL, like in the link, it was a sign that you were not professional. Like that was something that only like juniors did or whatever. Like he didn't go into detail about it. It was like a little quippy tweet, like I automatically discount designers who have design or creative in their portfolio URL, something like that. And there was people who replied being like automatically taking that as a joke. There was people who replied being like, what the fuck? This is a stupid piece of advice. Oops. I
First F-bomb. First F-bomb.
There it is. There it
Damn. I for sure thought it was going to be me. Was it?
My bad. Let's get back. Yeah, there was people who were like, this is stupid advice. Don't listen to this. Like designers have enough, enough things to worry about when they're trying to get a job. Worrying about the URL name is not one of them. And like, spoiler alert, I was one of the designers who was saying that. Then there were others. There was junior designers being like, dang, oh no, I've done this. Like, I've got this in my URL. I feel so stupid or whatever. And later on, he followed up saying, oh, this was a joke. Like, I was making a joke about the fact there's so many rules that designers put on portfolios. And like, I was just adding my own stupid rule to it. But it wasn't clear from that one tweet that it was a joke. And that's what was getting shared, right? And so inadvertently, this creator was giving bad advice to people because it wasn't clear that it was a joke. And I don't know, he followed up saying it was a joke later, but I think the damage, quote unquote, had already been done around the place. I don't know, I think he learned from it. But it was just a sign of like how something so seemingly small and insignificant to you could actually have an impact on other people. And I think that as creators, we have a responsibility to that. And to your point, Miguel, I don't know, do we have a responsibility to our audience to be PG-13? I don't think so. I think we're past that point.
We've gone over this, and PG-13 movies are allowed one F-bomb.
Okay, so as long as neither of you
we're still within bounds.
Uh-oh.
Haley, I'm looking at you.
Does it count that my cup says it on it?
Yeah, because only the people watching.
Put the cup down. We can't risk it.
Okay, one last question to round us out, maybe, because I feel like it's going to be a short answer. Is it possible to be a creator without having this responsibility to your audience?
No.
Yes.
Oh. Miguel, were you joking? Because remember, we have to be clear about that. Okay.
No,
wait.
I'm not joking.
So you think you can be a creator and not have this responsibility? Tell us about it. Yeah.
Well, the question is if it's possible. Is it right? No, but it is possible.
Okay.
So I think it is possible to just be completely brazen with what you do, depending on what your goals are. Like if your goals are just, really selfish and you can totally just do whatever you want and, the rules be damned or responsibilities be damned. But I don't think it's right or responsible. If you have the mind that you own your content and what you create and nurture in okay, let me get my mind straight so I don't say it backwards. So if you are of the mind that you own your content and what you create and nurture in your audience, then naturally you should own whatever comes of it, good or bad. However, you can just choose to ignore that responsibility and people might hate you for it, or some people get a lot of attention just being hated as well. So it's not all about being loved. So I don't know. That's my 2 cents. Haley?
Maybe.
Go ahead,
Charlie. Sorry.
I as you were saying this, Miguel, I was thinking like, okay, well, maybe this is where the difference is between influence and responsibility. Like maybe responsibility is something that you feel and that you have to like accept to some level and take on, like even if it means owning the consequences sometimes. But influence is something that we all agreed last episode that a creator has no matter what. If you've got an audience, you've got a way to influence them. So maybe that's where the difference is. That's really interesting.
Yeah.
You call back.
I'm like, now I want to retract my answer, but I think
Well, I was going to say no to start with as well.
Did I just logic bully Haley? I just logic
he
bullied
did.
Haley.
He did. Well, here's what I thought. Going back to this this gal Sharon Says So, who I'm, like I said, a massive fan of.
Mhm.
She also talks about whales, which I really like, marine life, which I find to be really comical. So it's like politics and marine life, and it's just
Great
really
combination.
entertaining. Yeah. But one of the things that she talks about is there's a lot of people on the right and the left, different political parties, right? That what their goal is to try to get people to think the way that they think, right?
Mhm.
And their goal is to try to, and what she's very clear about is that in order for democracy to be a democracy, you have to have multiple parties, right? You have to have two different parties. And I think that's, yeah, exactly, at least. And I think that's an important, like a differentiator, like that, whereas like, how do we identify good versus bad if there's no good or bad, right? If it's just, if it's all blurry in one thing. And so I think that there's no way on the internet that we're ever going to be able to, everyone on the internet's going to be good. We know that this screen is a magical little place where either wonderful people put out wonderful things or really bad people hide behind it and they say really horrible things and perpetuate problems that we have in this world. And so, yeah, I agree with Miguel. Possible and right.
Yeah. I now agree with Miguel.
I now agree with Miguel. His logic bulliness.
Not that one, Ben, sorry.
Bullied me into a different way of thinking.
And I also just want to bring up this one as well. I think this is a great point here as well that Furkan was talking about. This example I gave, asking, does it limit the means of social media if he's not allowed to speak his mind freely? Speaking about this creator I was talking about. And it's like, of course, anyone can speak your mind freely. But the main thing that I think we're trying to get across is that when you speak your mind, you also got to own whatever comes of that. Like if you want to say it as a creator. And whether you own it by just not caring and just like watching the world burn or whatever, as Ben has said here, if that's the direction you want to go, then fine. Would prefer not to be the case, but yeah, that can happen too.
Yeah.
Cool. Any last thoughts? Or
Well,
are we about wrapping up? Yeah. We got into some heavier stuff today.
We did.
But I think it was good.
We did. It went heavy. It got heavy pretty quick,
Yeah.
We were all like upbeat right in the beginning.
And then we're like, misinformation, fake news. Yeah.
I blame Miguel for that. Miguel said right from the before the episode started, he said, so guys, is this too dark? And then that was like what was on my mind right when we started. So that's where I took us. Apologies.
Oh man, like a self-fulfilling prophecy. I said that to be like, hey, let's call this out. Do we want to steer away from this kind of stuff? Because I don't want to be like, the Eeyore of the podcast over here. But I guess, it turned out good. I like the conversation. And the chat would have you think that we were just joking the whole time. Thanks to Ben and Teddy's banter.
The chat enjoyed this, I hope, anyway. And you know what? Anyone who's listening to this later on in the audio version, maybe you should come join us on youtube.com/ConvertKit.
Good point.
At 6:30 Eastern time next Wednesday.
Yeah.
And be part of this great
Or
chat.
watch Teddy's video on why he says show up live, right? It's the perfect example of, except not.
Because I made fun of Haley.
Yeah.
All right. Let's wrap this up. Thanks for the good conversation, you two. Thanks to the people in the chat for your contributions as well today. And we'll see you all next time, I guess. Bye.
Bye, friends.
Later, guys. Bye-bye.